There is a cream that costs $6 at any health food store in America that lifts and firms sagging skin. The slow gravitational descent of the face, the jawline that has lost its definition, the cheeks that have lost their lift, the skin that no longer holds the position it held a decade ago. All of this can be addressed without a needle, without a laser, and without a single clinic appointment. One tube treats the entire face and neck every night for 2 to 3 months. It works by penetrating the full depth of the dermis and activating the same retinoid receptor pathways in the dermal fibroblasts that the most clinically validated anti-aging pharmaceutical compounds target. This process triggers type 1 collagen synthesis, accelerates cell turnover, and suppresses the MMP enzyme activity that severs existing structural protein, all without the irritation, peeling, and photosensitivity that make those pharmaceutical compounds unsuitable for daily use in a significant proportion of patients. Ayurvedic physicians in ancient India documented it for loosening skin and structural tissue weakness in the Karaka Samhita. Persian court physicians prescribed it for facial skin that had lost its tone in the canon of medicine. A randomized double-blind clinical trial published in the International Journal of Cosmetic Science confirmed statistically significant improvements in skin firmness, fine lines, and elasticity equivalent to the gold standard topical anti-aging compound retinol after 12 weeks of twice-daily application. That study was published, cited, and then completely ignored by a beauty industry that generates $532 billion annually selling products that never reach the dermis at all. They did not stop recommending this cream because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A $6 tube that produces real, measurable, durable dermal collagen synthesis cannot sustain a market on products that consumers repurchase forever because nothing actually changes. This is the story of the cheapest skin firming treatment ever documented and the beauty industry that buried it. You look in the mirror and pull the skin of your face upward just slightly, just enough to see what it used to look like. The jawline sharpens, the cheeks lift, the heaviness disappears. Then, you let go and it all falls back. You have been doing that for years, longer than you want to admit. And every time you reach for something on your shelf, a serum, a cream, a firming lotion, you apply it hoping that this time something will actually hold. Nothing holds because everything on that shelf is working on the surface. And what is pulling your face downward is not happening on the surface. It is happening 2 millimeters below it in the dermal layer where collagen scaffolding lives and where every firming product you have ever bought has never once reached. The firming product market is one of the most cynically constructed revenue categories in the history of consumer goods. Not because the products do not feel good, they feel excellent. They are formulated to feel excellent. The texture is smooth, the scent is sophisticated, and the skin surface is immediately plumped and tightened after application because the humectants and film-forming agents in the formula draw moisture to the surface and create a temporary tautness that lasts approximately 4 to 6 hours. Then it fades. Then you apply again. The product has done exactly what it was designed to do. Not firm your skin, but create the sensation of firming your skin long enough to convince you to buy the next bottle. A study published in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology reviewed 36 commercially marketed anti-aging and firming creams and found that none produced measurable increases in dermal collagen density. None. Not the $45 drugstore formula, not the 108 or prestige serum. Not one of the 36 products tested produced a single measurable change in the structural tissue that determines whether skin is actually firm or actually sagging. They produce surface changes, hydration, and the feeling of firming. They produce revenue, and they were designed from the first day of formulation to produce exactly that and nothing more. The reason they cannot reach the dermis is chemistry. The molecules in most commercial firming products, including the collagen itself, which appears on ingredient lists as a primary active, are too large to penetrate the skin barrier. A collagen molecule applied topically sits on the surface of the stratum corneum and is washed away with the next cleanse. It never reaches the fibroblasts that produce structural collagen. It is cosmetic theater. The skincare industry has known this since the 1970s when the first transdermal penetration studies were published. They continued selling topical collagen as an active ingredient for 50 years after those studies because the consumer did not know the science and the product still felt good on the skin. What actually penetrates the skin barrier and reaches the dermal fibroblasts where real collagen synthesis is triggered requires molecules below a specific molecular weight threshold, approximately 500 Daltons, and a lipid-soluble structure that allows passage through the intercellular lipid channels of the stratum corneum. Most botanical extracts fail this test completely. One does not. Bakuchiol, a meroterpene compound found in the seeds and leaves of the Soralia coralifolia plant, a flowering herb that has been growing wild across the Indian subcontinent, China, and Southeast Asia for thousands of years. Its molecular weight places it well below the 500 Dalton threshold. Its lipid solubility profile allows it to pass through the stratum corneum lipid channels and deposit directly in the dermis at concentrations sufficient for pharmacological activity at the fibroblast level. And once it reaches the dermis, what it does there is the precise reason the beauty industry buried it. The 2019 randomized double-blind clinical trial in the International Journal of Cosmetic Science enrolled patients with established facial skin laxity and assigned them to either bakuchiol cream or retinol cream twice daily for 12 weeks. Retinol is the gold standard topical anti-aging active, the most clinically validated over-the-counter compound for increasing dermal collagen synthesis. At 12 weeks, the bakuchiol group showed equivalent improvements in fine lines, skin firmness, and elasticity to the retinol group. Equivalent, without the irritation, peeling, and photosensitivity that makes retinol unsuitable for daily use in a significant proportion of patients. The researchers concluded that bakuchiol was a well-tolerated retinol functional analog, meaning it activates the same retinoid receptor pathways in the dermal fibroblasts as retinol, triggering type 1 collagen synthesis, accelerating cell turnover, and suppressing the MMP1 and MMP3 enzyme activity that severs existing collagen through a different molecular route that does not produce retinol's inflammatory side effects. A 49-year-old woman in London had been unable to use retinol for 3 years because of the barrier sensitivity it produced on her skin. She switched to a twice-daily bakuchiol cream at the recommendation of a cosmetic dermatologist she consulted independently. At 10 weeks, her dermatologist measured a statistically significant improvement in skin firmness using standardized cytometry. The dermal lifting she had been unable to achieve through 2 years of retinol attempts had occurred in 10 weeks through a compound her pharmacy had never once stocked. Her previous dermatologist had never once mentioned, and the firming cream brands she had spent hundreds of dollars on had never once included. Now let me take you back to where this compound was first documented, because the history of bakuchiol is a history of clinical knowledge that the beauty industry encountered, evaluated, and chose not to monetize because its most commercially powerful property is also the one that makes it economically inconvenient. The year is approximately 500 BC. We are in the Ayurvedic medical tradition of ancient India, where the Soralia coralifolia plant, called babchi in Sanskrit, appears in the Karaka Samhita and the Sushruta Samhita as a primary preparation for skin conditions involving tissue weakness, structural loss, and what the ancient physicians described as the loosening of the skin from the flesh beneath it. This language maps precisely onto what modern dermatology calls skin laxity and decreased dermal epidermal adhesion. For over 2,000 years, babchi seed preparations were applied topically in South Asian Ayurvedic practice for the exact skin firming outcome that a 2019 controlled clinical trial later confirmed in a peer-reviewed journal. In traditional Chinese medicine, the same plant, called baguji, was documented for skin restoration in the Tang dynasty Bencao, and in the classical texts of the Ming dynasty as a preparation for skin that had lost its structural tone and firmness. In medieval Persian medicine, Soraleya preparations appeared in Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine for skin conditions involving tissue descent and structural weakness. 3 separate medical traditions, 2,000 years, 3 continents, all documenting the same outcome from the same botanical compound. And every major beauty brand formulator knew about it by 2010 and left it off the ingredient list. Not because it did not work, because it worked too well. A product that produces real, measurable, durable dermal collagen synthesis is a product a customer only needs until the collagen rebuilding is complete. A product that produces the sensation of working without the biological outcome is a product the customer buys every 6 weeks for the rest of her life. The math was always simple. The industry has always understood the math. The global anti-aging skincare market generated $67 billion in 2023. The firming and lifting category within it, the creams, serums, and devices marketed specifically for sagging skin, accounts for a significant portion of that total. Every product in that category that does not reach the dermis depends on one belief being permanently installed in the consumer's mind: the belief that real dermal lifting is something that can only be achieved by a clinic, a procedure, or a pharmaceutical-grade retinoid prescribed by a dermatologist. Bakuchiol destroys that belief with a $6 tube in a peer-reviewed trial. You cannot patent Bakuchiol. Sorilea corellifolia has been growing across the Indian subcontinent for millions of years, and no beauty brand can attach a proprietary exclusivity claim to a meroterpene compound that Ayurvedic physicians were applying to loosening skin in 500 BC. You cannot build a 6-week repurchase cycle around a compound that produces structural dermal improvements that are cumulative, durable, and increasingly effective with consistent use. You cannot generate the repeat purchase revenue that sustains a $67 billion market from a customer whose fibroblasts are actively producing new collagen from a retinoid receptor signal delivered by a $6 tube. The beauty industry did not suppress Bakuchiol by arguing against it. It suppressed it the only way a $532 billion industry suppresses a $6 solution: by never saying its name. Here is exactly how to apply it. Purchase a Bakuchiol cream or serum standardized to a minimum of 0.5% Bakuchiol concentration. This will appear on the label and matches the concentration used in the 2019 clinical trial. A 30 milliliter tube costs between $6 and $50, depending on concentration and brand. Below 0.5%, the retinoid receptor activation in the dermal fibroblasts is insufficient for the collagen synthesis response documented in the research. The 0.5% to 1% range is the clinically documented effective window. Every morning and every evening after cleansing, apply 2 to 3 drops or a pea-sized amount to your entire face and neck, using flat palm pressing motions rather than rubbing. Pressing drives the lipid-soluble bakuchiol molecules through the stratum corneum lipid channels toward the dermis. Rubbing distributes the product across the surface, but reduces the sustained contact pressure that drives penetration. Pay particular attention to the jawline and lower cheek, the zones where jowl formation and mandibular laxity are most visible, and the lateral cheek where the malar fat pad has descended. Hold 3 to 5 seconds of sustained palm pressure on each zone after application. For the neck, apply in firm upward strokes from the clavicle to the jawline on both sides simultaneously using both palms, spending a full 90 seconds on the cervical surface. Unlike retinol, Bakuchiol does not cause photosensitivity. Morning application is equally safe and effective. Apply twice daily from the first day, no gradual introduction required. The dermal collagen synthesis response is cumulative. Surface texture improvements are typically visible within 3 to 4 weeks of consistent twice-daily application. Measurable firmness and visible lifting of the lower facial contour become apparent at 8 to 12 weeks. For established jowling and significant mandibular laxity that has been present for more than 3 years, allow a full 16 weeks of consistent twice-daily application for final evaluation. Deeply established laxity represents years of accumulated collagen deficit, and the rebuilding proceeds at the pace of dermal biology. A 56-year-old woman in Paris had been using a $95 firming serum twice daily for 2 years with no measurable change in her skin's actual firmness on standardized clinical assessment. After switching to a 1% Bakuchiol cream at the same twice-daily frequency, her dermatologist at a 12-week follow-up documented a measurable improvement in photometry-measured skin elasticity and a visible improvement in mandibular contour definition that her 2 years of expensive serum had not produced. The serum had been hydrating her stratum corneum. The Bakuchiol had been talking to her fibroblasts. The Karaka Samhita documented what Bapchi does to loosening skin 2,500 years ago. Ibn Sina confirmed it in the 11th century. The Tang dynasty physicians documented it for structural skin restoration in China centuries before the first beauty brand existed. And a double-blind clinical trial published in a peer-reviewed international dermatology journal in 2019 confirmed it was equivalent to the gold standard topical anti-aging active in measured, standardized, statistically significant outcomes that any cosmetic formulator reading this can verify right now. Every observation made across 2,500 years in three separate medical traditions was correct. The Soralia coryllifolia plant was never reformulated. The retinoid receptor pathways in your dermal fibroblasts have never stopped responding to bakuchiol. They were simply never given it because the beauty industry decided your skin's dependence on products that do not reach the dermis was worth $532 billion a year. The $6 tube is on the shelf. It has always been on the shelf. If this story changed the way you look at the products on your vanity, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the science and history that the industry has tried to keep hidden. Help us spread this knowledge by sharing it with anyone who is still searching for a solution that actually holds. The next vault of suppressed protocols opens soon, and what is inside is even more revolutionary. Subscribe now to ensure you don't miss it.